Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rosa Mendoza, and I'm the president and CEO of ALLvanza. I'm thrilled you all have joined us today for what I know is going to be a fascinating conversation, innovation in the future of work in the wake of COVID-19. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge LULAC and Sindy Benavides for their partnership. We are so grateful for your collaboration and support. And I want to also thank Pharma for sponsoring this very important conversation. We've all seen how innovation and technology can transform virtually every aspect of our lives. The way we work, learn, heal, communicate with our friends and neighbors. But we've also seen that for Latino and other underserved communities, the impact of those changes can be complicated and hard to predict. Like most changes, there are costs and benefits associated. And the way those costs and benefits are distributed isn't always equal. In particular, new technologies in the future of work will transform our workplaces in ways that are exciting, empowering, but also profoundly disruptive. And in some of the most vulnerable moments of our lives when we need medical intervention, rapid innovation in the biopharmaceutical industry is allowing doctors and hospitals to offer unprecedented levels of care. How have our communities navigated the opportunities and the challenges presented by technological innovation so far? How should we think about and prepare for the even greater changes ahead? What can we predict about the unpredictable ways that technology will change the way we work, live, learn, and heal? Those are some of the questions that we'll ask today. And here to answer them, it's our wonderful panel: Sindy Benavides, CEO of LULAC; Maurita Coley, President and CEO of MMTC; Eduardo Cetlin, President of Mgm Foundation; Ramiro, Cavazos, President and CEO of the US Hispanic Chamber of Commerce; Gabriel, Director, Health Equity, American Psychiatric Association; and our moderator, Eric Gonzalez, Cybersecurity Compliance Specialist at Ridgeline. Eric, take it away.
Rosa, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining and dedicating the next hour just over that with us to what is a very important discussion for us to have today. As Rosa mentioned, and being a Latino myself working in technology, when I look to my left and to my right with my coworkers, sometimes there's a bit of a disparity there, right? In terms of getting to share my story with folks that can truly relate to the work that is truly innovating just the way that we live in our lives. So that's going to be the focus of our conversation today. And as you can see, we have some heavy hitters that have a lot of insight to bring to this conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give a short introduction of themselves to set the stage. Eduardo, I'll start with you, and then we'll work our way around.
Sure. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Rosa. It's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Eduardo Cetlin, and I'm the president of the Mgm Foundation. This is the philanthropic arm of Amgen, an independent medical biotechnology firm. At the Mgm Foundation, our main focus is to inspire the next generation of innovators. Very happy to be telling you a little bit about our work today. Personally, I was born and raised in Brazil. I'm an accidental immigrant, came to the US for a job at GE in Northwest Pennsylvania, ended up staying. My wife is also Brazilian, have two daughters, 8 and 12, and we really work hard to keep Portuguese part of our day-to-day life. Again, it's a pleasure to be part of today's conversation.
Great, thank you, Eduardo. Maurita, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank ALLvanza and LULAC for inviting MMTC to participate and for hosting this important discussion. MMTC is the Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council. We're 34 years old, celebrating our 35th year next year. We work at the intersection of tech, media, and telecom policy. In our space, we've been known as the nerds, the nonprofit that talks to all the other nonprofits about what's going on at the FCC and what is broadband and why do we really care about broadband access for all. We've worked tirelessly over the years to help close the digital divide and to create opportunities for multicultural ownership, entrepreneurship in media, telecom, and tech. And over the past 4 years, we've been very involved in helping to upskill tomorrow's workforce. Some people call it the future of work, because there are a lot of jobs out there. There are a lot of opportunities. And really what we need is to make sure that our people get to take advantage of the opportunities to upskill themselves and take advantage of these tremendous opportunities that are out here. So I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, Maurita. Gabriel.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. I'll echo also, as everyone else has said, thank you for having us here. My name is Gabriel Encontrías, and I am with the American Psychiatric Association, but the hat that I'm primarily going to use today is as an affiliate of the Center for Gender Equity in Science and Technology at Arizona State University, where I've done work there with Dr. Kimberly Scott, and also where I did my dissertation work on looking at Latinas and Latinos and STEM through the Joaquin Bustos Mathematical Math Science Honors Program. So I look forward to kind of using multiple hats to contribute to the conversation. And thank you once again for coordinating this.
Awesome, thank you, Gabriel. Ramiro.
Thank you. Thank you for moderating our panel today. And thank you to ALLvanza and LULAC for hosting us, and Pharma for being our sponsor. It's an honor to be here with each of our panel members and everyone that's tuning in to this discussion. It's an important time for the Latino community. My name is Ramiro Cavazos, and as the president and CEO of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, I work for 260 Hispanic chambers from around the country. We were founded in 1979 in Santa Fe, New Mexico, but many of our chamber members were founded close to 100 years ago. As many of you know, with the 61 million Latinos living in this country, we're one out of every 6 people in America. We built this country and we founded it more than 400, 500 years ago with many of our ancestors. Some of us are accidental immigrants, and we are all welcoming in this country based on our Constitution to create and build the American dream. And the economy was also started by the initial founders and people from Spain and other countries that came here 7+ generations ago. So this is a Latino country, in our opinion. It's the dollar sign came from the Spanish peseta. The S and the 2 bars stand for of course, the Spanish crown, but also gold and silver that at that time were part of our system, of the monetary system. And Latinos, as many of you know, have fought in every major war to defend our country. And today, still, we are fighting for our fair share of equity. And that's why the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce exists. We represent, in addition to our 250 chambers, 4.7 million Hispanic-owned businesses in our nation. We contribute $2.6 trillion to the largest economy in the world. It's an honor to be with you, and it's an honor to work with corporations, Hispanic business enterprises, and our chambers to make sure that this country, that we end racism and discrimination and put Latinos at the forefront where we deserve to be, where decisions are being made. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramiro. Sindy, over to you. Oop, we're having a bit of trouble hearing you, Sindy.
Is she on mute?
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you,
Perfect.
Cindy.
Perfect. All right. I just took off the headphones, and buenas tardes, good afternoon to everyone. You will be seeing me go on and off mute because there is construction right outside of my house and the timing couldn't be better, which is now. And, you know, just a huge shout out to Rosa, to Maurita, to Ramiro, to Dr. Gabriel, Eduardo, and Eric for joining us today and making time to have this important discussion. Maurita is absolutely honest when she says that they are the nerds and they are the folks that we turn to. Oftentimes, Maurita gets an email from me at all types of hours asking for, you know, clarification, for guidance on an issue dealing with the FCC. And I just appreciate you so much, Maurita. And, you know, Rosa is my hermana en la lucha, and you know, when we're not scheming away in terms how better to improve the lives of our community, we are chatting over how can we make sure that we see long-term changes and sustainable changes occur. And Ramiro, you know, there's just so much love for you and all the work that you're doing with the chamber. It's so refreshing to have a leader that's so authentic, that leads with conviction, and that is always championing our Latino businesses. And, you know, as the CEO of LULAC, I really have the honor to lead our grassroots organization, which is 91 years strong, 91 years young. And I know that we have LULAC national board members, including our president, Rosa, our former national president, who's tuning in, and so many members across the country who are tuning into discussion. And really what makes LULAC so powerful is our members. And every day we fight on issues around civil rights, education, economic empowerment, technology, healthcare, and so many others. In fact, right now we're most likely going to be heading to the Supreme Court and a voter suppression fight in Texas. So know that we are here to defend, to protect, to continue our 91-year legacy that we have in our community. And just a pleasure to also have new friends like Eduardo and also Gabriel and Eric in the loop.
Thank you very much, Sindy. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give a big shout out to ALLvanza, LULAC, and Parma for really getting this strong group of minds together on one Zoom session. But without further ado, let's jump right into it. And Sindy, I'd love to kind of get your perspective on AI, robotics, right? We knew this age of technology was coming pre-COVID. I'd be remiss to say if COVID did not rapidly accelerate not only the creation of these innovative technologies, but the adoption by the consumer to use these different forms of tech. How do you feel that these underserved communities are going to be able to navigate the challenges that adopting AI and machine learning and these different technologies, how do you feel we're going to be able to use those solutions, and what do we have to navigate and think about as underserved communities to be able to leverage these technologies?
You know, that's such a great question, Eric, to kick off this discussion. And I will tell you that, you know, if before we felt like we were drinking out of a fire hose, right now so many of us feel like we're trying to drink an ocean. And what we're seeing, not only in terms of AI, but just technology, and, you know, what has been coined the digital divide, is that what we're seeing in the midst of a global pandemic is a digital abyss. And I say that very intentionally because what that means is that there has to be an even more aggressive method and measure taken from every single individual, whether it's corporate America or whether it's government or whether it's the nonprofit sector, to make sure that our communities are able to be at the table as these important technological changes are occurring. And what I can tell you is that in recent years, many US employers have struggled to find enough STEM workers. And this lack of manpower has real consequences for the economy, making it very difficult for firms to expand and create jobs here in America while meeting the need and the skill levels. And, you know, I can tell you that for LULAC, we are working to pave the way. And I know there's so many other organizations that are also working like SHIP to make sure that, you know, we have more Latinos in the pipeline. But I can tell you that as we look at STEM specifically, Blacks only make up 11% of the US workforce, but represent only 9% of STEM workers. And when we look at the Latino community, although we're 18% or 16% rather of the US workforce, only 7% of STEM workers are Latino. And when you start diving into even more advanced jobs and looking at AI, gosh, we're barely 2 to 1% in the workforce. And so Eric, when you say that when you look around or you turn to the left or you turn to the right and you're the only Latino in the room, you know, the numbers match up, right? The data is telling us that we have a lot of work to do. And more than that, that as we look at the growth that will take place in America, right now we're 60 million strong. In just 30 years, we're going to more than double and be 130 million by 2050. And so what this means is that we have to make sure that there are robust programming and that the companies and government is really thinking intentionally about how we make sure that the future of work is present mind, that we really start not only developing the pipeline, but I would say the other one is making sure we have representation at the highest level so that as decisions are being made, the voice of the Latino community, the voice of our African-American brothers and sisters, the voice of our Native American brothers and sisters, and so many other communities are at the table. And the truth is that when we talk about AI, and I know that Maurita can dive into this and some of other panelists, it sounds like a really scary technological term, right? And people think like Star Trek, they think of everything except what we know is happening day to day, whether it's with your phone or your computer, or even what we see happening in our own communities. And so I think part of what we see, Eric, is making sure that we address the awareness challenge and educate our community more on how AI can work for us and how we work with corporations to make sure that it's not invasive.
Cindy, you bring up so many great points there, and I can tell you from my perspective, if you would have asked me when 10-year-old Eric, was I going to be a cloud security specialist, I would have thought you were talking about the weather one, and I would have just said no and ran away. But Maurita, on that same vein, the innovative technology that is being introduced to the consumer, that's creating new jobs as well, right? So from the MMTC perspective, how do you see kind of the workforce changing and underserved communities adopting these new technologies and joining that new workforce?
Thank you, Eric. And this is something that I think is another reason to commend ALLvanza and LULAC for having this panel, because Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies has been tracking the entire workforce transition and recognizing the fact that many Black and brown workers are concentrated in the types of jobs that are going to be phased out as AI and new technological advances come. So food service, transportation, hospitality, a number of other areas are particularly driving kinds of jobs as we see a lot of things changing. And then COVID, as we said, COVID has just kind of accelerated everything as people start to telework. And communities of color have always been more susceptible to, socioeconomic harms. There's the brown and the Black wealth gap that we've been trying to address for a number of years. But I think that instead of just being afraid of what's coming and talking about, where, being the people who talk about where the jobs are not, I think that what we have to do is talk to our communities about where the jobs are and what they can do, what we can do in order to be there. And there are workforce gaps, but there's skills gaps. There are a lot of jobs available, but we aren't necessarily trained in order to take advantage of those jobs. In the broadband area, which is an area where we work, there's millions of jobs that are going unfilled, and just the people that there just aren't trained workers to take advantage of them. And as we all know, in the tech area, it's the same thing. There's a lot of jobs that are available in tech, but there's a mismatch of the skills. And so I'm a boomer, I grew up in industrial age. I'm actually from Detroit as well. So it was much easier for us to get into the kinds of jobs where there was a low barrier to entry, where you could learn how to, put a car together, and you could be trained relatively easy and make a very good living. And in the technology area, the information area, you really do need to have certain skills, soft skills, of course, the creative skills, the emotional intelligence skills, but also the technology skills and the digital training skills, and in the telecommunications area, there are a number of jobs that have gone unfilled. So we worked with the National Urban League with their Urban Apprenticeship Jobs program that was designed specifically to train underrepresented minority workers and to take on these jobs that are available, like Wi-Fi technician and broadband field technician. And those are the kinds of things that we feel as if we all need to work on a lot more. Registered apprenticeship is something that we're really big on. We work with, as I said, with National Urban League. Charter Communications has an incredible telecommunications program. These are earn while you learn models. These are, you start on this apprenticeship program and you get paid from day one. And then you're getting the credentials to give you an upward trajectory of your career and to take care of your family. Similarly, I saw that pharma is a a sponsor in the pharmacy area. Pharmacy techs can make upwards of $100,000, but you need to have the technological skills training. So what we like to do is to introduce our communities to programs like apprenticeship, work readiness programs, work with people like MMTC, ALLvanza, Urban League, in order to make sure that we don't miss out. Of course, I think we'll talk a little bit later about a lot of these skills do require a broadband connection and broadband and digital literacy. And so I'll leave that to speak for someone else to speak about a little bit later.
Thank you very much, Maurita. I wanted to pause and for the audience mention, if you do have questions, please throw them and feel free to put them in the chat. Rosa will be monitoring that. We'll gather that. We'll have about 10 minutes at the end to address those with the panel. But Gabriel, with your education hat on, representing ASU here, we talked a lot about the opportunities that are just so apparently exist. There's just so many skill gaps and job gaps to fill those really interesting roles. How do you see us, and us being the underserved communities, being Latinos, Black and Brown folks, how do you see us taking advantage of just getting the right education, whether it's high school, college, and beyond?
So let me start off with, I think Sindy and Maurita did a great job of kind of laying the foundation for some of the challenges that we have. But I will kind of put it there, and I have a question for you, Eric, if you don't mind. I hate to switch it up on you, but what got you interested at an early age?
So I would say it probably wasn't early. It was, I adopted technology as I saw it was becoming a greater part of our lives. I think it was the turn of the iPhone. When I saw that a phone can come out and play music, I can watch videos on it, I can operate my life from a single device. I wanted to know how I could build that and work with folks that do that. So that sparked the curiosity.
And I say that because that's how we know that we need to create opportunities for our young and our youth to actually find something they can relate to. And a lot of them is things of social causes, social justice. What can I fix? How can I create something? So we have to think about those particular opportunities of how do we actually ingrain that within our community to spark the interest within our children. How do we tell our children you can actually do that and stop socializing our children to assume they're going to go into particular pathways? But in addition to that, it's really bringing in, this is where partnership is really key because we need individuals such as the panelists here. How do we bring industry to the schools? How do we bring industry in the universities? How do we connect everyone to create the ecosystem necessary to produce more people of color, and especially more women and girls of color in STEM fields? Because someone can aspire to be something they don't even know is there. I never knew I was going to have a doctorate. I never knew I was going to earn a master's. In fact, I kind of stumbled into college. God bless both of my parents. I'm a Mexican American. They're from Chihuahua, Mexico. They made it past junior high. But all my mother could always tell me was, you keep going. But I never knew what was the end goal because she didn't know what the end goal was either. And that's not her fault. It was just the lack of academic and cultural capital that we had. So I say that because that's how we can be key in how we fundamentally change our community. Right now, we're in an intersection where I think a lot of things are going to have to be addressed. So we're now trying to uncover a lot more of the biases that we see structurally built into our society. What are the key things that are maybe deterring our young people from pursuing an education? So we have to really have a deep conversation as to what are we offering people at the K-12 level, because by the time you get to college, you shouldn't be playing catch up. So we need to work in the K-12 system. We need to, as community members that we all pay taxes into the community, we need to be able to be at the table with our community and say, our schools really need to provide more computer science education. Right now, I think it's about 55% do not. So and we also know statistically wise, if a woman takes an AP course in high school, they're more likely to pursue a chemistry, an engineering degree, a science degree. So I say that K-12 partnership, let's all have a conversation together and be serious about it. I love what Maurita said about earn while you learn. I love when people say, oh, you could easily get an internship. Well, that's a luxury, especially when an internship is non-paid and you have to come up with the money and you come from a low income family that's just getting by on day to day. An internship is really a luxury. So yes, we have to look at other models of how our organization is actually putting money there, bringing money to the table to make sure that everyone can participate equally, or at least have real access to those opportunities.
Thank you, Gabriel. So, Eduardo, we've been talking about the apparent gap in STEM education for Latinos, but we've also mentioned pharma really, and other industries really pushing support to underserved communities to gain education in STEM-related degrees and certifications. Can you speak to kind of what you've seen from your perspective and representing Amgen, like kind of how you've seen STEM education kind of take shape and with underserved communities?
Absolutely. And somebody said earlier couldn't hear me well. So is this okay?
Yeah.
All right, great. So, so wonderful to follow Maurita, Sindy, and Gabriel, because it all builds, everything is connected. I think that's always the $1 million answers will come from ability to connect dots that have not been previously connected. I'm in an industry where we are now able to harness the power of the immune system to fight cancer and to win. This is the kind of conversation, we call it the dawn of the biocentury. What has happened around physics and chemistry in the 20th century, we're hopeful that we'll get there in biology in the 21st century. In fighting COVID, we have a lot of work ahead of us. We have huge hopes of the pharmaceutical companies who are working towards vaccines and therapeutics. But if you look back, if you say, let's talk about the future. Lincoln said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. How do we do that? So, 1 in 3 schools with high populations of minority students do not offer biology classes. Now think about that, 1 in 3. Now, even if you say, okay, what about the other 2 in 3? Well, the students are experiencing a biology education. I pick biology because that's the field that we work in, but you can apply the same to almost any novel concept. Students are learning science and biology the way we did, the way our parents did, in some cases the way our grandparents did. It doesn't need to be that way. I think about my little girl when she was in preschool. She got to move around her, and she was in a privileged setting in a very nice little school. And she got to play around. She got to choose what activities she was going to do for the time. There was a mix of time together and time doing individual work. And then she goes into kindergarten, and the desks are all organized, cemetery style. And she's expected to sit down, listen up, and absorb content. Another example, think about our schools. If they were to teach us how to ride a bike, what would they do? Probably spend a couple of weeks telling us about the history of the bicycle. Then, talk about all the parts of the bicycle. If you're lucky, you'd be able to get a little bit about physics of balance. And then we'll give you a test. And if you got an A, you're very excited and celebrating that achievement. We believe that the future is going to rely on a next generation that has the capacity to navigate a much more complex world. You talk about the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, enabling the next generation to live up and keep their inner child alive, awake, curious. We've done a lot of work around empowering teachers to bring hands-on programs to the classroom. The learnings are fantastic. Kids who historically have said, science is not for me, get to hold a pipette, get to transform a bacteria into a protein factory. And they say, time out, maybe this is for me. They need to be presented with the topic in a way that allows them to be to realize what really it is and what the impact potentially can be. In technology, in the heels of COVID, we've been doing a lot of work to scale up our impact. Every child deserves access to high quality curated content. And we have some great examples of how that's becoming available for free for students around the country. So a lot of work, but I am optimistic in the sense that I think the answers are there. We just have to be more effective at bringing it all together.
Eduardo, you mentioned you represent such an important part of STEM education and things beyond computer science and becoming a scientist, becoming an engineer, a biologist. I That's just so important as it enables effective use of technology through, like you said, spreading content, spreading awareness, allowing people to understand exactly what science is doing, how it's innovating at mass scale, on their phones. So love that. But Ramiro, there's an important point to make here, and there's also an opportunity in becoming an entrepreneur for a young, underserved community, Latino, brown, Black person to really start a remote workforce, or start a company from their living room, right? That's never been more of a realistic scenario than it is today. I'd love to kind of get your perspective on kind of what exists for these underserved communities to kind of take advantage of these opportunities, and how do we manage that remote workforce?
Well, thank you, Eric, for the job you're doing moderating this great panel. I'm grateful to be here and to share that there's no question that the great equalizer in our society, no matter if you're Latino, African American, Asian, or Anglo, or any other group, is education. Education is a great equalizer. Dr. Gabriel knows that. That is something no one can take away from you. And the key is to, as my dad used to say, no queremos que nos den, queremos que nos pongan donde hay. We don't want anything to be given to us as a community. We just want to be in the center of where decisions are being made and where the action is at. And it's very clear that many across this country during COVID, Eric, a lot of school districts have set up cell phone towers and paid for that themselves in communities that are, deserts for 5G or for internet or Wi-Fi for our young people. I know the housing authority in many communities is also setting up Wi-Fi access at many of the housing locations where seniors are living with their grandchildren and are fighting poverty. And the best way to get out of poverty in any country, especially this country, for Latinos, is to get a quality education. It's not a big secret what the key to success is for anybody on this panel. I loved hearing the stories of how each of us ended up accidentally in this pathway to success. But in many ways, that's the story of our life, is that we need to realize that there's great opportunity through this crisis. And sometimes these crises don't come our way to disrupt, but to actually clear the path forward. And I'm a big believer in the fact that Latinos were powerful. We need to own that power. I'm so excited to work with LULAC and of course, ALLvanza and each of you to make sure that together we can do tremendous things for our 61 million plus Latinos. The second point I want to make is we're a very special culture. We are not a race, as you all know. I love to tell people being Latino is a state of mind. We're Asian, we're Black, we're Caucasian, we're Jewish, we're Protestant, Muslim, Christian, rich, poor, and of course, educated and uneducated. And the key to fight our way forward and to lead our way beyond COVID-19, Eric, is for all of us to work together better, to partner where it makes sense, to leverage and put Latinos and Latinas where they need to be. Less than 2% Latinos and Latinas on corporate Fortune 1000 boards. That's unacceptable. We need to change that. Less than 7% contracting by US government, where most of us pay taxes into it, as you all know, more than even some billionaires. We need to get our fair share of that and not take into that first rejection for that first contract and stop competing. We need to, que no nos rindemos. I mean, we need to not give up, not take no for an answer, and keep fighting for public contracting and private board seats and contracting. And as these numbers are increased for our communities through this year, we need to prepare our Hispanic business owners to get into those fields. The field that you're in, Eric, cybersecurity, the US Department of Defense is the largest buying service in the world, and they contract a lot of their cyber work, as you know, externally with companies. And that's how we'll create wealth for our Latinos and Latinas, is to go in and get the education that we need, but also we're natural entrepreneurs. And we help build this country, and we keep the lights on, and we get the job done. And all of those things should not be lost on us. And that's why I'm excited to be on this panel and hear the work each of you is doing, and the participants tuning in. Hats off to LULAC and the board of directors for their tremendous leadership for close to 100 years. I think, Cindy, if not more, we're honored as a Latino business organization to play a key role in being your authentic partner to move this economy forward, and to make sure that Latinos, if we're 18% of the population, that we get at least 18%, if not more, of the economic pie.
Thank you very much, Ramiro. Cindy, you began to mention before, there are, from your perspective and the work that LULAC has been doing, there are many programs and initiatives that LULAC is really leading the way on to help kind of bridge this divide. I'd love to kind of get your perspective as to what you've selected as really what's truly important for us to move this needle forward.
No, thank you for that question, Eric. And I'll tell you, before answering that question, I did want to mention that along with Ramiro and other national organizations, we are working with the Latino Corporate Directors Association with Esther Aguilera, and making sure that companies who market to the Latino community, profit from the Latino community, but do not have any Latinos on their corporate boards, make sure that they have a Latino on their corporate board of directors. And the issue of representation is so important, and I'm just very fortunate to be working arm in arm with Ramiro and so many other national leaders to make sure that we continue to force this issue, to uplift it, because the honest truth is that it's not seen as an issue if it's not spoken. And I would also mention, Eric, that when we look at these jobs, we can't be what we can't see. And if we're underrepresented, to your point, not seeing anyone in these fields is completely unacceptable. And what that says is that there's so much more to do. And, in that vein, LULAC has been really creating robust programming that focuses on STEAM focus works, and also workshops that, it also includes youth mentorship, academia, career guidance, social innovation, making a difference. And, one point that I want to make is that in a lot of these programs, whether it's for Driving Dreams or whether it's our LULAC's Youth Education Enrichment Series, the first start is believing in our children and making sure that they understand that they are more than capable, that they were born successful and intelligent, and that it's really making sure that they understand the information that's out there. And to Denora's point, we are going through a global pandemic where we are forced to see the digital abyss that exists with the Latino community and with other communities of color, and just the aggressive measures that have to take place. And, we are seeing companies like AT&T and T-Mobile step up with new initiatives that target our communities and partnering and with the different superintendents and school districts. And I'm just so proud that in that vein, Eric, LULAC as an entity is able to work along these companies, and also Verizon and Charter Communications and Comcast, to make sure that we're reaching our communities, and also that the companies are understanding what more they are able to do. And so as I think of, LULAC's role in terms of programming and what we do, I am so proud to say that, since 2004, LULAC has had community technology centers, and throughout these last 15 years, we've served close to 2 million Latinos across the country in accessing internet and making sure that we are training and that our families, parents, and children have the tools that they need. Also something to point out is that since 2006, we've impacted more than 20,000 participants. And in just 2020, amidst this global pandemic, we've impacted close to 4,000 individuals in just 1 year. And so for us, it's important to raise up that point, because we see the massive need and gaps that exist, but also the role that private, public, and nonprofit community can do to make sure that we address it. I'm also so happy as the first Latina CEO of LULAC in 90 years to say that we have programs that specifically focus on making sure that more Latinas are entering into STEM fields. And we have something called Latina Leads, which focuses on middle school age girls immersing in STEM education. And it's everything from one, being exposed to the different professions and industry leaders, to taking field trips, to be in a setting, to be able to see what really happens day to day. And what we know is that, to date, over 95% of students now believe that it's important that women be in these fields and that they be active participants. But more important than that, Eric, is that what we see indirectly and what we've seen through the different initiatives, whether it's Latina Leads or Tecnolochicas, in partnership with other organizations, is that our Latina leaders, once they are going through this program, they also improve, one, the way that they view themselves and their self-esteem. And instead of being, a silent engager in their classroom, they're now an active student, and they're active and participating, and now they're also leading in their classes, and that's so important. And then I will also mention that, we have something called the Latina Entrepreneur Academy across multiple cities in America, and that, more than 50% of our graduates go on to start their businesses within 18 months. And why this is so important is because we know that minority-owned businesses hire other minorities. Why this matters is because we're seeing record levels of unemployment in the Latino community, where our households are being impacted, where people are having to make hard decisions if they self-evict so that they don't end up in court, or if they can purchase flour, beans, and cooking oil versus laundry detergent. And that is the reality that our community is facing at the moment. And lastly, I do want to uplift Grow with Google, which has operated, since 2017 in terms of digital learning and computer literacy skills. And for LULAC, we're so proud of this partnership, Eric, because, this really speaks to the power of our grassroots councils. And just this year, we've done over 200 workshops. I wish I could tell you I did them all. That would mean I would be on Zoom every single day for the for all 7 days, but no, really, it's our councils from across the country, 41 states, Puerto Rico, and Washington, D.C., who step in, see the issue, and are rolling up their sleeves to make sure that our community is getting the information, which leads to the point that, simply being aware that these programs exist can be a challenge, right? And making sure that the community understands of the apprenticeship programs that are being led by the National Urban League and MMTC, and or the different workshops and programs that we have with LULAC is so important. And this is where all the participants who are tuning in from Facebook Live and from Zoom can be helpful in making sure that more people are aware of all this work that we're doing.
It's so incredible and just really enriching to hear how much work is being done by Latinos for Latinos. It's just beautiful to hear that, Sindy, and thank you for sharing. You began to touch on a really important point in a couple of different ways, in that we're talking today about the future of work, but there's a really apparent problem in our community of just being connected. And Maurita, you began to touch on this during your comments a bit earlier, and broadband access is still a very real problem for underserved communities. I'd love to hear from your perspective, Ramiro, how MMTC has kind of championed uplifting that effort to make sure that we just are all connected so we can get in the game.
Great, thank you so much, Eric. And COVID, as we've said, COVID has sort of thrust a lot of these systemic problems to the forefront because, almost overnight, so many people were, prevented from either going to work or going to school. And so it thrust us back onto our home broadband networks. And some of us, all broadband is not equal. Everybody didn't have broadband at home. And some people didn't have the connections, the devices, and, to educate their children, or to, if they were able to telework, to work from home. So MMTC supported and promoted, along with LULAC and ALLvanza, the FCC's Keep Americans Connected program, which was a partnership with hundreds of companies, but starting with the broadband providers, like Comcast, AT&T, Spectrum, T-Mobile, Verizon. They all participated in not disconnecting people, agreeing not to disconnect people for a period of time, even if they couldn't pay their bills, they become unemployed or whatever. So starting with things like that during COVID, but then those things were extended to a large extent. And so you had some opportunities where people who had perhaps had broadband before, they were able to work with their provider and work out forgiveness of bills so that they could get back connected. Because underlying everything that we're talking about here is the need for a connection and for a high-speed connection. It's essential not only to our children being able, to go to school, but also, if you're going to be working from home, if you have the privilege of being able to work from home. And then there was an article in the New York Times yesterday that we spoke about on another panel that talked about the devices, the lack of devices. And if, for instance, your kids, are all of a sudden home, even if you do have a broadband connection, you've got one computer. So how are you going to homeschool all kids, virtually educate 4 kids at home with one computer? And some school districts aren't all created equal, because some schools districts sent the kids home with a nice laptop and then others didn't. But there have been public-private partnerships that have come about largely accelerated. They were already in the works, but accelerated because of COVID. So you have in Chicago, in Philadelphia, you have the companies working with with city government, with private foundations in order to get people connected who didn't necessarily have connections before COVID. And I think that's a remarkable opportunity for the future and what things can look like to get us connected to the broadband in the future. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about is the importance of educating our communities about the kinds of careers that are available if you upskill. There's, according to National Science Foundation, Latinx workers make up 16% of the country's workforce, but only 6% of STEM jobs. So as Sindy just said, the number one thing that we have to do is to increase awareness, increase awareness about the programs that are available, the low-cost broadband programs that are available. We're advocating for stimulus vouchers to be provided, to families who can't necessarily afford broadband at home, because it's become so essential. But it's important that we, number one, educate our communities about the ability of these programs to help them in this time of need to stay connected, and then educate the next generation. We're talking about the future of work. Help to educate our children about there are a lot of jobs where you can work from home, and some of us don't really know about that. People on this call, a lot of us are very privileged, and nothing, we still need essential workers, but there are a lot of jobs that where you can telework. It saves transportation costs, it saves childcare. I think Sindy and I might be two of the few people who do like to still go into the office. But it does, you can save, you can save money. I'm taking care of my dad now. He's come here from Michigan because I'm at home most of the time. So there are benefits, and it's important to increase awareness. But more than, and then in addition to that, there's the knowledge and awareness about upskilling. We're in an age where you do need to have skills and training, and there's a lot available. During this time of COVID, for instance, in Detroit, just my hometown, Wayne State University admitted its largest class of African-American first-year college students because it's largely because it's virtual. So they had like a 58% increase because people saw that, okay, I can go to school and then I can still work because my school is virtual and I can fit that in. And there's lots of other, before COVID, there were a lot of programs that upskilling programs that you could do in person. During COVID, there have been a lot of them have emerged online. So some of them are free. There's resources at the Department of Labor, as Sindy said, you know, LULAC and MMTC have resources on our website, and just helping our people to understand that there are jobs that you can qualify for. You can get paid to get trained for those jobs because the industries that have these jobs need us. And it's our opportunity and our role to make sure that our people find out and are aware about these opportunities.
Eduardo, you began to mention a bit earlier the Amgen's investment in online education and platforms that you're creating. I'd love for you to kind of expand on that for the audience so we can learn a bit more about that.
It's enormously challenging to deal with this sense of, if you don't have a device, you don't have access to these opportunities. At the same time, I think part of our job is to imagine a future where that is, where the device exists, what kind of exposure the students are having. And that's where we go back to high quality curated in creating the avenues where students can see and have readily available for them the best that the world has to offer. So my main suggestion is that in our experience, you talk about innovation in education, people think about complicated, think about virtual reality. In a lot of ways, simpler is better. Teachers know how to effectively educate their students. It's time to listen and engage the teacher community. We've launched something with Harvard earlier this year called Lab Exchange. 5,000 learners enrolled in January. We're at 1.3 million users today. Why? Because it enables teachers to use content that's cutting edge, side by side with what they have individually proved that works in their setting on a regular basis. We bring mentoring opportunities for students so teachers can say, well, now that you're in this platform and you're seeing some of the things that I need you to learn ahead of your test, how about you also take the opportunity to learn about some of the jobs that exist? And that information is readily available to you. The sense of what you can't be, what you can't see is so, it's this, again, this balance, it's so simple yet so difficult to overcome. In the days of social networking, we tend to be along the lines of the people that believe in the same things we do. With Lab Exchange, we're trying to paint that broad picture of the world in your fingertips for everyone. Very proud of partnerships with school districts and how teachers are being brought in to facilitate these conversations. So things like having a light app is very important. If you have low broadband or limited broadband, a light app will be much easier to use than a heavy one. So there's all sorts of technology questions that ought to be asked as we're thinking about the large school districts and the large number of kids that we need to reach. We are excited. We've made an investment of roughly $20 million over the last 5 years in Khan Academy and in Lab Exchange. And love to connect with you and with the participants. If you want to learn more about it, feel free to reach out. The future, as William Gibson says, is the future is already here. It's not evenly distributed. We can do a lot to showcase that future and put it in the hands of every kid.
Thank you so much, Eduardo, and thank you, Maurita, as well for your comments. Just so much important work happening. Gabriel, I'd love to kind of get your perspective as an educator, kind of on that as well. Exactly, how do we support those students that would like to, from really a perspective that goes beyond just understanding that they can have a career in STEM, but how do we have that conversation? Like, one, as an educator, what does that look like? Then I'd love to pivot and ask you a question about just the world that we live in, that is COVID and telehealth.
So let me see, where should I start? I think I'll start with the simplest because we should simplify everything. So in my dissertation, where I focused on Latinas and Latinos pursuing a doctorate, which is very rare, and there's not many of them out there, all of them could go back, and this is why I asked you my original question. All of them went back to K-12 when there was one teacher in particular that just let them know they were special. I'm not saying they're going to tell you you're amazing or you're the only child in the world that matters, but they gave them at least that affirmation that they were unique. Because at that point, we all know during K-12, it can be a little turbulent for some children, because if you're doing something out of the norm, like trying to pursue a STEM degree, or you come across as too nerdy, too geeky, like you're trying to be part of, actually be educated, sometimes you get picked on. So having affirmation at any level really does help. But I think just going back even to what we keep saying is, change is going to happen when we ask for it. So I've been keeping up with the chat room, and there is some individuals talking about, well, I went through parents that were monolingual Spanish speakers. Even to this day, my dad speaks very limited English. I grew up being that child that had to translate for their parents. My older sister had to go to my teacher parent conferences because my parents would get no value out of it. But I say that because it doesn't mean that we can't. I know it's harder now as adults, we can say we can empower our parents, but we do have to rely on the schools. If the majority of the people they're serving are bilingual or monolingual Spanish speakers, regardless of the language, then because our tax dollars are going to those schools, let's advocate for more bilingual teachers. So we can't turn away from the system just because we don't think we know how to navigate it, because change comes from every angle. You don't have to be an academic. You don't have to be a large funder. You just have to have your voice heard. Just again, is trying to see as parents and even as educators, where can we link those gifted students? And I say gifted because they have a passion or an interest. So I'm not talking about necessarily always merit-based, but those gifted students, let's find all the opportunities that Sindy mentioned. Let's talk about programs like CompuGirls that's been funded through the National Science Foundation for decades. Let's start placing our children in those programs. I know right now it's a little harder. And Maurita, I don't believe you can say enough about the digital divide between her and Sindy. That's the one thing we've learned is we caught ourselves having to be very reactive right now because of the pandemic we're going through, but we're almost going on to about 9 months, getting to the end of the year. It's gonna be time that we now start being proactive and we learn some lessons. And some of those lessons are that we have so many people in our community still being left behind. And going back to the children, it goes back to the education. There is just a literacy issue. We've now told our parents, if they happen to be at home and they're not essential workers having to work out there, you now get to be a teacher. And you now get to be a breadwinner. You now get to figure out how you're gonna manage this. And I know it's difficult for everyone, but somehow we have to remember that the core of it is still education and the students learning and kind of trying to figure out how we can still facilitate some level of normal in their life. So it doesn't just become a bleak year where anything that they were becoming interested in, or it doesn't get stunted during this time.
And Eric, before we move away from this point, I mean, like I do want to uplift and acknowledge that the current school system was not built with communities of color in mind. And I say this, one, because of our deep history in Texas, and having our LULAC member back in the 1940s and 50s pair up with a university professor to create the model of the Little School of the 400, which was to teach our Mexican-American US citizen children 400 English words so that they would not fail in school. And Congressman Johnson, who then becomes President Johnson, took this model to create Head Start, which has impacted millions and millions of children. And I say that because one other area that we have to work on is how do we become better advocates, not only within the system, but also change the system altogether if it's not meeting the needs of our families and community. And at this point, to Dr. Gabriel's point, is that we see so many Latino families who are struggling to keep their children in the school system learning. And, I just want us to think of someone that we may know within our circles who is not computer literate. And I will tell you that this actually happened to me on the one day that I went into work. It was the first week of school, where my son touched something on the computer. And if you can just imagine me for 45 minutes, working with my mom to try to get my child logged back into the computer system and all the processes that it took. I mean, like, I really want us to think about this intentionally and think of that one person or many people that we know, and how we would describe some of the simple things that we, as individuals who are on laptops and computers all the time, take for granted. And also to acknowledge that there are so many children who are now babysitting their younger brothers and sisters because their parents are having to go to work. And we know that 5 out of 6 Latinos have to leave their houses every single day to work and get paid. And what that means is that we are the essential workers. We are the essential workers, even though we lack all the Department of Labor protections. And so, we have to really make sure that we understand the moment that we're living in and what lies ahead, not only with issues of mental health, domestic violence, but this digital abyss that is a real thing in our community. And if you haven't read the New York Times article from this morning, we know that since May, 8 million individuals additional are living in poverty today in America. And what does that mean for our communities?
Wow, Cindy, that's such just heavy, great points made there. And we're starting to get questions pouring in from the audience. One really in particular, I'd love to get Ramiro, your perspective on here is, we have 5G coming online. We have small businesses that want to upgrade to be more meaningful and reach larger audiences. What advice would you give them from the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce perspective?
Well, like I said earlier, we need to ask or else we will not receive. We need to run for public office and get on school boards, on city councils. We don't have the equitable representation of Latinos in public office. So it's very clear that decisions where contracts and policy are being made, we need to be at those tables in addition to the corporate boards that Cindy and I are working on. So my advice would be to mobilize. It's good to see that we've got people voting in record numbers. Sometimes you have to stumble and fail to learn that our vote is our voice, and many of us as Latinos thought that we could not make a difference, but it does make a difference. 1 or 2 votes in every polling location in the state of Texas with 254 counties could have made the difference in any election during the most recent round. So as Latinos, we need to have that autoestima, that self-confidence to know that we don't need to wait for somebody to make a decision for us, nor do we need to ask for permission. We need to go out and create that change that we want in 5G, in our school districts, and empowering our communities to have more grants for small businesses and have that come from public dollars, because those public dollars are using our tax money in record numbers. And so it's very clear to me, Eric, that the cover has come off the ball, as we say in baseball, in 2020. And but we need to seize the moment. We can't, assume that this is going to happen and we're just going to have business as usual. Business is not business as usual any longer. So I would urge people get involved with their local chambers, be very active with their LULAC councils. That's where decisions are being made, and that's where leaders are being developed. They're not born, we develop them. And you get developed as a leader in actually going out there and getting and asking for things and not taking no for an answer. I think that rejection should be part of our model, and overcoming that rejection and not let us, keep us down. I mean, if we don't get that first contract, if you're a small business owner, as I said before, come back a second time, but be better prepared. That's what we hear from a lot of folks that say that Latinos aren't represented, is because we need to show up. And so I know it sounds trite to give that advice, but the reality is that we need to mobilize, and now is the time to do it, because this is, we're going to be twice the population we are today. As Cindy said, You know, if we don't get it done, this country will not achieve the heights that it, and we know it deserves to have.
Thank you, Ramiro. Another really interesting question that really brings us together today as well, Eduardo, I'd love to get your perspective on this, is telehealth and telemedicine is probably the industry that is now really being pushed to the forefront, right, because of the pandemic and the state of the world that we live in. How do you see the Latinx and the Black community adopting this technology, and where do you see us going from here?
So from here, for Dr. Gabriel.
We'll start with you, Eduardo, then I'd love to get
Sure.
Dr. Gabriel's comments
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity. Back to what Sindy talked about, the way education and the way the schools work. There's a lot that we can use this crisis to really reinvent. Healthcare, same kinds of opportunities. Very difficult to place all the doctors we need at every place we need them around the world. Technology now allows people to get the care they need wherever they are. Learnings from the developing world, frugal innovation, huge opportunities ahead.
Thank you, Eduardo. Gabriel, anything to add?
I think the only thing I can summarize as we think about telemedicine is just once again going back to what Maurita and Sindy have really hammered in on this. Unfortunately, right now, what we're learning is the barriers that we have. There's not enough access to technology. There's a lack of digital literacy. In addition to that, coverage. In theory, telehealth, you would think would really open doors and it'd be access for everyone. But unfortunately, we're learning right now that's not the case. But I say that because that means there's something we can fix. So every problem has a solution. And I just say we should focus on that to make sure we're never caught in this predicament again.
So I'd love to open the floor for parting comments to our panelists, to the audience as we begin to close our discussion. I'll start with Maurita.
Thank you. We were on our panel yesterday, and I guess we've been doing a little bit of a marathon for a variety of reasons. But one of the things that I think is very important for us, because we work inside the Beltway on a lot of the policy areas, is to recognize the costs to our economy when all people aren't either on broadband, proficient in broadband, you know, with the skills, with the training, you know, upskilled and able to do the kind of work to take care of their families and to have, take advantage of these high demand jobs. So I would say that, number one, I think we need to vote with our hearts and vote in a sense that we're looking out for all of us. This is the experiment, the melting pot that we've all said that America is, but it's clearly not equal. So I think that we need to focus as advocates, and this is more for our panel, just to make sure that these opportunities are made available for the people who need them the most, whether it's getting access, getting a subsidy of some sort to get on broadband, or getting the skills that you need in order to live a high quality of life and to take care of our families.
Well said, Maurita. Over to you, Eduardo.
Very briefly, stay curious, ask questions. If you have kids, encourage them to ask questions, even if you totally fine to say, I don't know. Lots to learn together. Gandhi said, live as if you were to die tomorrow, learn as if you would live forever. Lots of learning for us all to do.
Love that. Gabriel?
I think the key thing I would say is try and be there for one another. I know right now, many of us are practicing physical distance. That does not mean social distance. Everyone's mental health well-being is really important. Everyone's is really processing all of this differently. So just reach out. If it's a parent, a loved one, a friend, someone you haven't been in touch with, please reach out and just know that we're there to uplift each other. And we have it within ourselves to get past this little hurdle, and definitely vote.
Eric, did you say Ramiro?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you completely. Thank you again to LULAC, ALLvanza, and Pharma, and everyone on the panel for giving me the opportunity to join you and for sponsoring this discussion, and everybody that tuned in. For me, my parting message is that I have seen some tremendous acts of kindness and witnessed them where businesses are helping each other or rebuilding businesses or patronizing businesses that they want to avoid being closed through this COVID crisis, how it's impacted 1 out of every 3 of those 4.7 million Latino-owned businesses. So that's point number 1 I have that gives me hope and inspiration for the future. And 2, we've also learned how interconnected we all are. We can't ignore a business that's struggling or a person that we know or someone that leases space from our building when we hold a note at the bank for that building. And we need to work with our entrepreneurs, our small business owners, and defer rent if possible, and the way the cable companies did for providing broadband service. That's a customer that we're going to lose forever if that business shuts down, and then it's a service that the community won't be able to receive. So those are the 2 points I want to share is just how interconnected we are, and how the world quite actually has grown and become smaller because of this global crisis. It's the first time we have a recession that's global at the same time, not different parts of the world with different economic strength. Asia strong while South America is weak. This is the first time, and we did it to ourselves to avoid the transmission of this virus. And we hope to have a vaccine soon, and that we continue to adhere to good viability and health. And then, of course, the importance of all of us being interconnected. So with that, muchísimas gracias to everyone that supports a small business, because that's a business that supports our families.
Thank you, Ramiro. Over to you, Sindy.
First and foremost, thank you so much, Eduardo, Eric, Gabriel, Maurita, Ramiro, and Rosa, for all the work that you do, for being a part of this really transparent, authentic, and honest discussion. And, extra kudos to Ramiro, who was multitasking at the same time, but still, made time to be with us. So, Ramiro, te mando un fuerte abrazo. Ya sabes que eres un amigo querido, and, he really has been a newfound friend. And Maurita, Ramiro, and I all came into our positions at the same time. So it's just been a wonderful journey to walk with friends and individuals who do great things in the community. And I will say, Eric, that words absolutely matter. And we're living at a time when our very ethnicity makes us targets to individuals. And I would say that what Eduardo said about our children is so absolutely right. The other day, my 5-year-old Peanut, mi hijo, was telling me that I fight with words. And it's really interesting because we as parents can sometimes label our own children, but we have to be able to recognize their independence, their strength. And my little Peanut also fights with words. And so, I want to make sure we also as parents advocate for our children and advocate for each other. And as we head into November 3rd, let's remember that, this is the first year that Latinos become the largest ethnic minority bloc in the history of America. There are 32 million Latinos who are eligible to register to vote, and that every 30 seconds, a Latino in the US is turning 18, every 30 seconds. And as we think of our collective power, let us march and protest by casting that ballot. Let's make sure that we are defiant and disobedient by electing people who value us and who share our values. And, Rosa, to you, thank you for really being behind the scenes and organizing all this. And to Pharma, just a huge shout out for making this possible.
I'm just honored to be amongst great company, and it warms my heart to see such amazing people in amazing positions that are making great changes. So with that, thank you all for allowing me to be here with you today, and I'll turn it back over to Rosa.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you to our speakers for sharing your expertise with us. As we have heard today, we have some big challenges ahead and some amazing opportunities as well. I know this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and I look forward to continuing to collaborate with all of you on these critical issues. Again, thank you to our sponsor, Pharma, and LULAC for partnering with us on this very, very important conversation. And finally, thank you to all of you who made the time to join us today. I know these are very busy times, and it's wonderful to know that we have such a large and diverse community committed to engaging in this important work. Thank you all for joining us, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.